Hello, and welcome to Poets versus the Pandemic. I am Karen Alanier, and I will be your host tonight. I'm so pleased to have you joining us for this reading featuring Henry Crawford, who is sharing our crowdcast stage with David Keplinger via video and Janet Walenta live. The entire program is scheduled for 1 hour. Poets versus the Pandemic is a series dedicated to poetry books that have been published in this year of COVID-19 and audiences who have been conscientiously sheltering in place. The WordWorks and Cafe Muse, the sponsors of this program, are doing everything possible to promote these books so that they go out into the world and maybe even into your hands. That green button below will take you to a page where you can purchase books by the poets presenting tonight and support these programs with a donation. Your participation means a lot to our success, and we at WordWorks and Cafe Muse thank you wholeheartedly. We encourage you to use the chat function to let us know how things are going for you tonight and to express what you think. If you have questions for the poets, please use the Ask a Question button. Also, vote for the questions that have already been asked to increase the possibility that these questions will be selected. I will start with questions having the most votes, and we will explore what we have time for. Don't worry, you are not on camera and need not do anything special. Just come as you are. Please bear with us if we have a technical glitch. This platform is like the early days of television. Coming up in this series on July 29th is Susanna Case, and on August 3rd for Cafe Muse is our annual translation program with Andrea Jerkovich and Seth Michelson. Both translators were published in the WordWorks International editions, curated by Barbara Goldberg, who will make the introductions. And Barbara, I know you're in the house. I'm glad you're here. Remember, if you can come back to this reading at a later time, and all you have to do is use the very same link you clicked to get here tonight. You can sign up for all of our readings by using our channel, which you can find in the chat. So now I am going to bring Henry on stage, and I will be introducing him with great pleasure. Henry is the author of 2 books of poetry, American Software, published in 2017 by CW Books, and Binary Planet, published in 2020 by the WordWorks. How Crawford approaches poetry is unlike anything I've ever seen, but yet it gets at the heart of the human condition. Poet Bill Yarrow wrote, "Crawford is a techie madman, offering a new code of poetry to a new iteration of readers. Binary Planet is an arresting collection unlike any you've ever seen, full of finely tuned poems where computer coding, and especially square brackets, invade and wreaks havoc on conventional rhetoric and sense. While you can expect to meet the computer Hal from the film 2001, A Space Odyssey, Crawford will also take you across the Edmund Pettus Bridge as a white man who wasn't there with Martin Luther King, but who wonders who he would be now as a member of people who were rough and tumble immigrant factory hands and who was raised in Queens, New York, across from Rikers Island. Crawford addresses the pop culture of which we are inundated: spin classes, getaway cars, television, video and pinball games, but also high culture, Bach fugues, black holes, Walt Whitman, how to write poetry. Crawford addresses practically every aspect of our modern life, from brain imaging to the words banned by this current political administration. Buckle up. Henry Crawford will give you an exhilarating ride. Welcome to the Crowdcast stage, Henry Crawford.
Thank you so much, Karen. Thank you. They all say that is the best introduction I've ever had. Thank you so much. And thank you everyone for coming by and sharing this reading from the Binary Planet with me. I'm going to start with a poem that I wrote for the Walt Whitman anthology last year, Endlessly Rocking, to celebrate Walt Whitman's 200th anniversary. And it's a poem about the little picture in the front of Leaves of Grass. This is Walt Whitman, Ekphrastic. I never look at it. I always skip past the woodcut portrait in Leaves of Grass. I think it's a woodcut, but I can't say. I'm typing into a blank laptop screen. Nor do I know what edition or what year. I think he's got a hat on and his arms are crossed. He may also be balding, I'm not sure. Maybe a funky belt hangs loose around his middle-aged waist. And out there on the edges, I imagine there are small ink dots sort of fading around the lines. I don't know if there are wrinkles around his eyes. And even if there were, I think they'd only be suggested. Maybe his arms are wide open, hat in hand, standing like my grandfather, who worked a linotype machine in Lower Manhattan. I wish I could show the both of them this device that I'm working on, the way that it answers all of these questions. But I'm not going to Google. Instead, I imagine you standing there, and someone is asking you to hold still, and you, Walt Whitman, are looking at us. The Binary Planet is, for me, really a system of shared duality. There's the world that we experience and the world that we desire, like the twin planet system that's always falling into each other. We never get to live in either one. This is a short poem that deals with my experience growing up in Queens, New York, when right over the river, no more than 10 miles away, Billie Holiday and all the masters of jazz were creating that wonderful music. And Frank O'Hara would write a poem about memorializing the day Lady died. And so, but I was a child, and this is years later, Frank O'Hara. I was only 5 years old and 15 miles away when you leaned against the John door at the 5 spot. So I came to this poem a little too young and a moment too late to do much for her, except to listen, eyes closed, saying to myself, it's only a song. And many of the poems in the Binary Planet involve cars. Men and women driving in cars and getting into car scenarios. For me, the car is sort of the moving living room of the American life. So remember traffic? Well, this is a pre-pandemic look at the Darwinian struggle that goes on between drivers on our highways. This is traffic jam. A white sail hitchboat floats up outside my roll-down windows. In front of me, a canary yellow Honda pumps the brakes as we work together to stop a scheming Lexus coming in off the shoulder. But now the lane with the boat is suddenly moving, and I'm passed by a truck full of oxygen tanks, leaving just enough space to get in. But oh no, there's a battered Camry showing no mercy. And here's the Lexus trying to get in again, and the oxygen truck, and even the sailboat coming falling back, looking to squeeze in behind me. But the Honda and I are standing our ground as the lanes begin to clear, and we're moving again as I shoot by the Camry to get ahead of a black SUV with a family of stick figures waving from the window as taillights come into bloom all over the road, and the Camry swings by with the oxygen truck in full retreat, And the man with the sailboat is cursing at the guy in the Honda for allowing the Lexus to get back in. But the Lexus is quickly pulling away with a smile in the mirror and a middle finger for all. This next poem, we're going to stay a little bit more in these cars. This one, driving by a farm at a distance, was just recognized as a second honorable mention for the 2020 Lumix 9 ACM Poetry Contest. So you'll be able to see it in the Lumix 9 anthology. This is Driving by a Farm at a Distance. A Pennsylvania farm knows you're just driving through. They see your rolled up windows and let you go. I sometimes imagine waking up to a table of butter and milk, my imaginary wife adorned in gingham. Outside, imagined animals are waiting for me to imagine them too. There might be pigs, but more likely chickens. I imagine myself putting on my farmer's suit to scatter some feed. I believe there are machines that I imagine need fixing. Heat of the day glistening on my soaked bandana. My imaginary son in the next field, all blonde cowlick, stooped over a row of young corn. Maybe he's a 4-H club hero or a desk-bound nerd who wants none of this. But there's always an imaginary dock, sometimes going out upon a useless pond, sometimes buried in the woods by a dragonfly creek. I am afraid of autumn. It's then, I imagine, the evening will appear to me. My plain wife listening to the radio, imagined music in the farmhouse air. This is the night I will stay on the dock, no one calling, lowering myself into the flotsam of leaf dust and spent butterfly wings to fall with the stars under the surface of imaginary water. And staying in the car, we'll move to an urban setting. And this one is a sort of a meditation on the way that happiness really has its own timetable for us. This is Jersey City. It was probably just the gentle tapping of brakes, the way a car will come to rest at a red light in the rain. On the corner, a green and white Go-Go Mart appeared in the rainwater light of my windshield. A night store, open, 24 hours. And I was happy to see this store. The items inside, crayon bright, set out in order, with a red smock woman working alone, her outline melting in the drizzle of my window, minding her store at night, her freezers, magazines, her lotto machine, her coffee pots, all quiet and still. She was a red smock woman. Her store, a fluorescent rainbow cast across the splashwater street. And I was happy to be stopped, waiting on this flawed corner of paradise as the light was turning green. And this is a poem that Karen mentioned. The dualities of politics include the binary nature of language. Here's a poem that I wrote in the early days of the Trump administration that addressed that administration's attempt to ban 7 words from the official documents: vulnerable, entitlement, diversity, transgender, fetus, evidence-based, and science-based. So as soon as I read about this, the challenge was down to include all 7 of them in a poem. And this one will appear in Catherine Young's Written in Arlington anthology that just came out. So you'll be able to see it there. This is the 7 disappearing words. First to go were the vulnerable, with little voice and no entitlement to fairness. Next up, diversity was whited out in one clean stroke, along with evidence-based, as in provable or true. Words that made people feel uncomfortable, like fetus, or threatened the powerful, like science-based, had to be deleted. Without words, you can even make a people disappear. So on a plain gray desk, a blunt red pen crossed out transgender, and they were gone. And of course, there's the dualities, some that we prefer to ignore. Tonight, many people in the world will go to bed hungry. And this is the poem I wrote for the 2019 World Hunger effort. and it won first prize. This is the Fruits of Famine. On those nights, we traced the shapes of fruit until the dark became our eyes. On those nights, we left our fields, unhearing the crack of broken roots, the silence of dying ground. On those nights, twilight filled the deserts of our crossing with the vermilion breath of watermelon. On those nights, the stars seeded the skies above the camp. Jackfruit guards stood still as celery stalks. On those nights, we dreamed like you of strawberry days on porcelain plates. And on those nights, I made an apple out of sand and watched it blow away. And the next poem that'll round out this little political section is a historical poem that asks, who would you be on the Edmund Pettus Bridge back in Selma, Alabama? The poem has an epigraph by Chief Justice John Roberts in the case Shelby County versus Holder, where Roberts said, without irony, our nation has made great strides. It's probably one of the most unfortunate statements made by a Supreme Court justice since the much maligned Separate but Equal. This is driving across a bridge. For all the supposed wisdom of rivers, they offer no solutions. Licking the dock sides of cities, the open sores of warehouse windows, the ragged hoops of vacant parks, tagged and slashed beside stone walls and forgotten monuments of cement, as I crossed the Whitestone Bridge into Queens, wondering who I'd be on the Edmund Pettus Bridge. Mine is a tribe of immigrant factory hands raised across the Rikers Island Narrows, armored in shot glass rings, measuring ourselves by the hats and coats of others, fearing what we do not have, protected in the normal ways, the family ways, the generic ways, the muted, necessary, everyday ways of hate. It's always 1965 on the Edmund Pettus Bridge, some locking arms, some wielding billy clubs, some are praying, others firing tear gas, others walking, some on horses, some will roll up the windows, lock the doors, look straight ahead, stay in their lane as the bridge arcs over a river of lost history bleeding out of Selma. And shifting gears a little here, this is a sort of a longer poem that I consider I like to call ones like this a cosmological love poem, because it explores how we are ourselves in this world where we also are in the same world with all of the laws of physics and all the laws of love and all of the laws of physics. This is After Midnight on a road outside Casper, Wyoming. Maggie is sleeping beside me as highway lights spin a circus wheel of stars and signs along a valley of real and imagined homes arranged like circumstantial fortresses along the plains of the gasoline night. Panoramic backlit towns winging off the windshield like galaxies moving away in all directions as pings and flashes of LEDs spark the incandescent dashboard with small bursts of information only to recede back inside the car like luminous creatures on the floor of some undiscovered planetary sea or the final flares of a distant civilization's lost war. There's a blue Kerouac light radiating off the North Star of a high-mounted 7-Eleven sign as the road takes speed and distance to arrange the cars and temporary partnerships, arriving and departing like anonymous lovers, meeting up and moving on in steady streams of visible and invisible light at a fixed speed, no matter where we go or what our circumstances present or the way we find ourselves or how we happen to be. Maggie is dreaming of being inside me, exploring the ribbed cities of my fluid tubes, the innumerable piano wires of the 1,000 reaches of my limbs, the neural connection signaling sensation along the cellular cemeteries of my blanched skin, my double-star partner, lighting and darkening our always falling surfaces like the intermittent brilliance of an interstate moon or the neon pulses of a 24-hour welcome sign. The earth is a special house, seething defiance amid the dead minutiae of interstellar waste, barreling along on blind rubber, obeying the same laws as keeps the car on the ground, as lights the way ahead, as keeps the past in the rearview mirror, as thrusts us out onto the road ahead, moving always further away. Okay, and now this poem is a true story, or at least as true as any story as any poem can present. It's a story about my garage band in Queens, and also the choice presented by my mother when she learned she was pregnant with me. And it's also a song, a poem about what it's like to wait on an 800 number. This is Making an Auto Insurance Claim. My side view mirror got whacked by an unknown driver, so I called an 800 number to make a claim. And I was put on hold, listening to a song with a strange xylophone solo, and they broke in every 3 minutes to thank me for my patience. Now, I don't play the xylophone, but I was in a band called Curb Your Dog with a drummer they called Nutty Chuck. He knew 3 notes on the xylophone: C, C sharp, and D. He could play them fast or slow, but we had to kick him out. So Nutty Chuck and a guy named Horse moved to California with the xylophone. And around this time, the phone was asking if I would like to take a survey at the completion of the call, after which the song with the xylophone came back. There's always a tendency to account for things. My Aunt Grace, who was not my real aunt, learned to play the flute at the age of 98. I remember asking her about my mother. As she talked, she would toot a note or two. She told my mother, toot, toot. My dad would never, toot, toot, leave his wife. So all the children, toot, 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 would be illegitimate, toot, toot. My mother almost took her own life, toot, when she learned she was pregnant with me, toot, toot. Grace said I should be grateful they didn't have abortion in those days. I tooted back, I'd be good either way. Toot to you. And now the phone began asking questions. I gave a 7 to the service rep. I gave 0 for the time on hold. I gave my mom an 8. I gave myself a 9 for being patient, and 10 for the song with the xylophone solo. And this is a poem that I conceived. This is a gift poem. I gave this as a gift to a friend of mine at work, a young couple that I was working with at the time, and they were going to get married. And I wanted to give them a wedding present that would be a poem, that would be a road back to the summer of 2017 when they got married. And so I wanted to have it be all ways of orienting this summer in time. And it's funny, a few things have changed. Some things haven't changed. Some things are still going on. But I hope that someday when they look back at it in 30, 40, 50, whatever years, they'll be able to pick this thing up and find their way back to 2017. This is when Victor and Lyndon got married. It was the rain-bomb days of August in the age of Despacito, 10 years after the rise of modern food trucks, during the penultimate season of Games of Thrones. 951 years since the Battle of Hastings, just days before the North American eclipse. In the era of John Oliver, 1 year after La La Land, when the Travelocity dude was riding high, but Progressive Flow was slowly losing ground. These good years of cold brew and meal pal as online deliveries were just taking hold. 17 years before Social Security was set to run out. As cracks were spreading along Greenland's mountains, we still wore earbuds. Frank Underwood was president, waiting for 2020 campaign. There were snow leopards in the wild. It was the age of Netflix, HBO, Amazon, and Google. Years before our inevitable collision with Andromeda, when the sun was still burning hot in middle age with so much atomic fuel to burn. There were blueberries in our salads, strawberries in our Frogurt. They made a table for us. It was summer. And so we are here in the DC area, and that makes me want to think of DC pinball. And so I'd like you to think of the District of Columbia like a giant pinball table. This is DC pinball. Shot out of Fort Stevens cannon, the ball caroms up Georgia Avenue for 50 quick points off the Leisure World globe, ricocheting through the strip mall stores of Aspen Hill to spin jauntily down the Starbucks corridor of Connecticut Avenue, picking up dollars in the doorways of K Street law firms, lighting up lobbyists for cash and prizes, whirling around the tidal basin only to be trapped in Jefferson's Dome, then loosed by a flip of the Washington Monument, knocking the ball into the reflecting pool, where the poor once stood waiting for their own bonus points. At the lap of Lincoln, who kicks the ball around the outer rings of DuPont Circle, up Mass Ave, the navel-gazing observatory, picking up gargoyle points off the walls of the Washington Cathedral, then up the Neiman Marcus Highway of Wisconsin Avenue, past the grave of Scott Fitzgerald, before falling into the ancient waters of the Rock Creek, now flowing silently by a pickup b-ball game at Candy Cane City, untouched and gaining speed as it sails past the proud shores of P Street Beach to slip through the hands of white-gloved Georgetown, unable to make the save, as the ball drops into the Potomac on its way out to the big sea that knows nothing of us. And this, now I've got to embark on a little bit of screen sharing here, and because this next poem, okay, there we go. This next poem deals with that, a black hole. This is Black Hole Ekphrastic. It's a poem that is a tribute to the poet Stanley Plumley, who was Maryland Poet Laureate for many years, a teacher to many of the area poets in the DC area. And he passed away just last year, just about the same time as this photo was being taken for the first time of a black hole. And this poem has an epigraph from one of Plumley's last poems, At Night. And the line I took from Stanley's poem is, "The dark itself, not dark enough." This is Black Hole Ekphrastic. Dog's eye darkness, suspended, spider-like, in your starry black bag, scoping all comers, like a blind decoy eyeing its prey, gaslighting all who make it to your edge until another sun is made mortal by your pull. Seeing is never believing. You lay waiting like a cold cup of black coffee, shining, lightless, your space, your time. I can only hypothesize your insides from the finite horizon of eyes. But touch? You offer a rim of sealed skin, then nothing. And finally, for my last poem, I want to thank Karen Alanier, who introduced me, who also really introduced me to Gertrude Stein, and really taught me how valuable a poet she was, and really turned me on there. And also to my editor, Nancy White at WordWorks, who helped lay out this poem in the book. If you see it in the book, it takes place on two layers of text. There are a text of Gertrude Stein from Tender Buttons, and my own poem lays on top of it. And so I want to thank Karen and Nancy White. And this is it's the end poem of the book. And this is the love poem of an average man. Take my nail-bitten hands, my oil-stained shirt, my steel-toe shoes, and let's step out onto ground. That is not you. That is not me. In your cloth coat, plain shirt, and flats. Pretend your beauty as a gun pretends its aim. This is the tumble. This is the end of fortune, throwing off our gold, bailing out a drowning boat. I need to know the window of your weeping, the thin glass. I need to know your jewel box closed for good. There was a wood floor, raining outside. I want to sit with you there and be honest. Is there anything in the attic? Is there anything that can be had? A gray lock falling, don't push it back. Help me gather my lost toy soldiers. I want to show you my night with its sorrowful smile, peering over the kitchen stove in the blue of a losing flame. We've seen too many afternoons to fall for yet another. Hold me in my overalls. My grime will not rub off. I promise not to be you. I want to be the outside and you. I want to be the boy and the woman in you. I want to be the girl and the man and you. I want the shelter of night and you. So walk dangerous with me. We wield the sharpest knives. Bleed out these wounds. Expose the cuts. A river of blood is ours. This is the tumble. There are no more rocks to hold on to. The answers have been written down and forgotten. There is something in nothing. It is possible to be someone. It is possible for us. Thank you very much. And I will turn this back to Karen. Oh, and now, did we have? Stop. Okay. So maybe you had the black hole during all of that last part of the reading. Okay, because I forgot to go back. All right. So, Karen.
Yep. Yes, Henry. That was a very fine reading, maybe one of your finest. And even though we had the black hole for your last poem, which is that wonderful love poem embedded on top of Gertrude Stein, it worked. It worked quite well.
Yeah.
So I want you to hang in here for a minute because some of the audience might have heard David do the reading of his award-winning poem, but I was thinking it would be good if you could say a few words about David and why you invited him and how this video came about.
Oh, okay. Right. So David Keplinger is he's a nurturing poet who gives far more than he receives. And if you look at the stream of people that are here, so many of them have studied with him. Many of those people know him, and he will. He's in a way, he's Mr. Blurb. I mean, he's done blurbs for everybody when they write their first book. He will organize your book. One of the things he does in the workshop, you can give him your half-baked poem, and then he'll rearrange it and then hand you back something that could go into the New Yorker. He is he's a poet who gives far more than he receives, and so I was honored to ask him to come in. Now, he couldn't come in tonight because he's out of town, and he's got an internet connection that is so bad that he would consume his entire data plan. He would consume his entire data plan had he come in here. But I know he's in here in spirit.
Well, how about if you read the poem, Henry? Would that work for you?
I think it would. I think that's good. Let me see if I can pull it in here. Let me see if I can magically use the internet to. Let's see. I got a black hole. Maybe I can get this thing. Let's see. There we go. This is David's poem that was the Writers Magazine Emily Dickinson Award for 2020. This is Reading Emily Dickinson in Amherst, Massachusetts. I know how it feels to live in a small leaden room with only snakes and birds as consolation. I know how to imagine death by falling through stories of floorboards like a poem flutters through molecules, air, and time. It never lands in the yard. The trick is not to die while dreaming of death. That's why the circle of doors and windows here remain open a little. That's why the poems always seem to end on slant rhymes and dashes. That's why the hawthorn cone is never quite in full bloom, but almost. I too come here respectfully, bow halfway at thresholds. I know how to wait at a completely empty window, holding out my hands. Now that's how you write an award-winning poem.
So, Henry, I know that his last book, the latest book, is The Long Answer, which is a selection of work over a 25-year period and includes some new work. Does it include this poem?
Yes, it does.
Ah, okay. And so that's the book that we featured for David tonight. So
Yes,
that's good.
yes, I believe it's in the book. Yeah.
All right. Well, we certainly welcome David's presence here, and so glad that that could be part of this program, this really special program, which I really appreciate it. So I'm going to kick you out of the screen here, and I'm going to invite in Janet. And so here we go. Let's see.
Thank you, Karen.
We're going to get that going. And we're going to give her a voice, and we're going to give Henry the boot. And Henry, you're going to turn your mic off for me. And then, all right. So many thanks to David for that, contributing that part of the program, and to Henry for that wonderful reading. Now, welcome, Janet Walenta. You have been working in elder care, I understand, recreation for 25 years, and you are very active on the local poetry scene in suburban Washington. Henry has sung your praises for a long time. And so I'm going to give you the screen, and you are.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me? Could you say in the chat? Thank you very much, Karen and Henry, for letting me join you tonight. I've been writing a lot of pandemic poetry lately. And the first of these is called Host Me. And if you've ever hosted a Zoom event, maybe you can relate. I'll be there a half hour early, checking the lighting and settings. I'll be there to make sure things run smoothly. I'll be there waiting. And meanwhile, I'll check the news and read more about the creature that lives inside us now. I'll start to swell and itch. And when I can stand it no more, I'll rise to look out the window into the night sky, its starry host laid bare. But I'll return to bless the bread. I'll be there to bless the wine. I'll be there to lead the litany. I've set the table. Come, all things are now ready. I await the occasion to admit you. And this is called IRL. My calendar suggests locations. It breaks my heart to remember the cafe in the town square, the nook off the lobby, the rectangular room with the rectangular table and the smell of stale coffee. In my mind, they'll be there when and if I return, but in fact, they may already be shuttered. We met IRL last March under a flowering branch when we were collectively 50 pounds lighter and countless years younger. I know people who've lost people. You've lost people. And here you are in a little box next to folks from 3 states away, people who, unlike you, have had no chance to infect me. And this is called French Twist. I can be forgiven for not flossing every day. I can be forgiven for drinking too much. I can be forgiven for failing to squeegee the shower. I can be forgiven for sinking to the level of pure biology. I would like to have someone put my hair up in a French twist. I would like to host a boozy lunch at the Old Angler's Inn. I would like to flick through the albums at a vinyl shop. I would like to talk to someone in person. I would like for these lists to lose their context and become dense, mysterious, poetic. And finally, this is called No Good Reason. There is no good reason for a jar of Duke's mayonnaise in our refrigerator. This is a ludicrous calamity, one that has never occurred in the history of this appliance or any of its predecessors. Duke's is not alone. No Evil Foods plant meat comrade clucked chicken shredded strips in my freezer. What? The giant store brand peanuts cause less anxiety. They're not quite right, but they're plausible. Someone else has made these choices, and at personal risk. Someone who is exposed, someone with bigger problems than the cognitive freakout of weird brands, but I hope for his or her or their sake, without my underlying conditions. Someone has decided no Hellman, so Duke's. I would have picked Heinz or Kraft instead. Hellman's, Heinz, and Kraft are all on the same page about what mayonnaise packaging should look like. Blue and white, not yellow for fuck's sake. Who does that? I moved Duke, whom I've come to think of as an elderly Southern gentleman, a little backward with a shuffling gait, to behind the milk. A bit of the label shows through, though, but I don't have the heart to rearrange everything. A soul-crushing glimpse of yellow every time I open the refrigerator begs the question, under what set of circumstances would I possibly acquire a jar of Duke's mayonnaise? Thank you.
So, thank you very much, Janet. That was terrific. We really like having what's current, and you're a very brave soul for coming on with everything new. That's fantastic. And I want to invite Henry to come back to the stage, and we're going to unmute him and put him on the camera. And as you see, there are a couple of questions in the question box. My curiosity is always quite large. So if anybody else wants to add any questions to our roster, that would be good. But let's start with the first one, and that is, Janet, what made you start writing poetry?
You know, I don't remember. I consider myself primarily a prose writer. I do remember when I was pre-literate. I remember saying to my dad, instead of tell me a story, I'd say, Dad, let me tell you a story. That's my earliest memory.
Yeah.
That's a pretty good answer. How about you, Henry? What made you start writing?
Well, you know, I was working in these websites back in the early aughts, and when you work on a website, you have to put up sample text in order to see how things are going to lay out and so forth. And I began to write, and before you know it, I began to say, you know, that's almost like a little poem, actually, you know. And then it somehow just came out. It got onto the screen, and a lot of that wound up on pages, and then it became poetry. And that's how I got my start. Yeah.
Well, and that makes a lot of sense for the approach that you take with your writing. That's really interesting. Both really good and interesting answers. Let's see, what else do we have in here? Okay. All right. Okay, here's a question. How do you write about COVID-19 in the midst of the crisis, well, without falling into cliche or short-sightedness? I admired how you pulled this off. Who was that
Thanks.
question from?
It took me a while to find a way in, but I can't really write about the big picture. I don't have those skills or that kind of fortitude. I just can say about what little stuff I'm going through.
Okay. All right, then. How about Henry? What instrument did you play in that garage band?
Well, I can tell you for sure it was not the xylophone.
Right.
But I did know 3 notes. I was a keyboard player. Now I play guitar, but I was a keyboard. I mean, I had a little electric organ, and eventually I got a synthesizer, and I was a keyboard player.
Okay, because I was wondering if it was some kind of horn with all the tooting that was going on.
Toot, toot, toot.
All right. Well, anyway, I think we have had a lot of fun here tonight. Henry's motto for this program is, if you're not having fun, don't do it.
Yep.
So, and that's also the motto that I've always operated under with the WordWorks. You know, if you're not having any fun and it's a lot of hard work, well, maybe you shouldn't do it, you know. But anyway, here we are, you know, and WordWorks has been around for a long time. And so it's with the goodwill of people like Janet and Henry that we continue on. So thank you both very much. It was wonderful. I'm going to take you off screen, and I am going to conclude the program, and we will do what we usually do. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this evening's readers, and it will extend your enjoyment by purchasing books. I want to show you, this is Henry's book, and I'm very proud of it because it was published by my publishing house. Nancy White was largely responsible for this work, and I want you to let other people know about the series, you know, and come back again. Our next program will be on Wednesday, July 29th at 7 p.m., and it will feature Susanna Case, who's in the house tonight. Hi, Susanna. And her 2020 book, Dead Shark on the N Train. Register now so that the Comcast will automatically remind you about the program. And thank you so much, and a very good night to you all.